Hangout, Tuesday Hangout. We've got a few people watching already, a few questions coming in already, which is great. But if you are new, if it is your first time, thank you for watching. You're very welcome. My name is Colin Munro, and this is Tony.
Great to be here.
So yeah, we're here to answer your questions about English and learning English. We've got a few questions already, but keep them coming in because there's only a couple there, and I think we can get to a lot more this week if you get them coming in. So we are trying something a little bit new today. We're using a different service for doing the live stream, so hopefully that will make things better. So yeah, shall we get started then, Tony?
Yes, I think maybe the stream may have skipped some of our intro, so we might want to say hello again.
Okay.
We're doing something a little bit different. We're using a different set of software to do the live stream today, so we might have a few things that are a little bit different. We might have a few technical difficulties, hopefully fewer than we were having before, and hopefully this will be a lot smoother. No, Susanta, you're not late. Yeah, so let's see. Was there anything in the intro that we really need to repeat?
No, not really.
Okay.
But let us know if you can hear us okay and see us okay.
Yes, please let us know.
Just give us a thumbs up. Well, give us a thumbs up as well, but let us know in the comments if you can see us. Okay, shall we get started then? We've got a question from Lolly Lolly. So where is it? What was she saying? Oh yeah, here we are. Please, how do you pronounce want and won't? Thank you. Well, I think I just sort of modeled it there. Want and won't. So it's an O and O. That's the difference between those two sounds, O and O. Now, is that the same in an American accent, Tony?
Yes, it is. And again, you can kind of see it with the lips, right? Want and won't. So with a won't, you're pushing your lips forward more, and want, you're opening your lips up more. Want.
I feel like
want and won't are more likely.
With I want to go.
Mm-hmm.
In British, it's more of an O, and in American, it's more of a want.
There's variation. You'll hear want and want. I want, like almost like an you hear both.
Yeah.
Won't is more.
Actually, this ties in with a video I've been working on today about the cardinal vowels diagram, because you know, we on our phonetic chart that we're used to, we see the sort of 12 vowel sounds, but in reality, vowels don't really work like that. There's almost like an infinite number of vowel sounds, in the same way that, you know, there's an infinite number of numbers between 0 and 1. There's an infinite number of vowel sounds because, you know, there's a scale. For example, like the top row of the phonetic chart is E, I, U, but that's kind of a scale. You could equally go E-U, and there's an infinite number of sounds there, infinite number of sounds between those 2 points. And I think that's why some similar vowels that are, you know, close to each other create these issues. So like want and won't, and especially when you throw in the added layer of, you know, regional variations and accents and things.
Yes.
So yeah, great question. I hope that's helpful. Lolly Lolly, let us know. Yeah. So what's the next question we've got?
The next one is by number 1, I think.
This is quite a long question. This won't fit on the screen.
I'll just read it out. So number 1 says, "Hello, sir. I do believe you are both fine. I hope you're fine as well. I would like to know the difference between modal verbs plus have plus past participle and modal verbs plus be plus past participle. For example, would have been or would be." I think that your question with might be a little bit different here. If you're talking about passives, there's 2 ways to do the passive with modal verbs, and that's with be or have been. So the parallel would be would have been gone or would be gone. In which case they're just two different ways to say the passive. They're both correct. But would have been is different. It's not a passive at all. It's a past present perfect. Have been is not a passive. It's a past or a present perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, let us know if that's answers your question, number one. It's always difficult when we just get this sort of grammatical structure without an actual example. If you can give us an example sentence, it's a bit
Yes.
more helpful. So we have to sort of make up an example in our head, and that may not.
It might not be what you're thinking.
Yeah.
The thing here is that the passive, the way the passive works, is usually the only time you're going to see the verb, be by itself, right? Is with a passive in this kind of a situation. The trick here is that been, B-E-E-N, is also used with the passive sometimes, especially with modal verbs. So that's why you have to have before been. You can't have been by itself. It's have been, right? And so that's where that shows up. The have, I would have been doing something, as opposed to it would be done.
Yeah. Now I'm just checking something here because this week, with this software we're using, it allows us to go live not just on YouTube but on Facebook at the same time. So we are live on Facebook as well. So if that's the page where we are. If you are watching us on Facebook, please send us a comment. Let us know. We can see the chats coming up from YouTube. We should also see the chats coming up from Facebook in the same place. So yeah, if you are watching on Facebook, please drop us a comment. It'll be great to see you. So oops, what's that? Yeah, right. Have we got another question? Jakir says your phonetic video was so amazing. Well, thank you very much. Thank you so much. It's really great to know that our videos are helping people. That's why we keep doing them, and we hope to do them even more. Actually, so Suzanne has got a question here. I think I may have skipped some, but we will go back. What does no pun intended mean? So, well, what is a pun, first of all, Tony?
Well, a pun is where it's a kind of joke where you use one word that sounds like a different one, and it's a kind of a joke. It was really popular even in Shakespeare's time, so it's kind of an institution in English. My brain's going kind of blank here. Can you think of any good pun jokes, Colin, for an example?
Let me think. Well, it's like when.
Oh, okay. Oh no, go ahead.
Well, yeah, no. When I was just going to explain, yeah, when one word can be interpreted in sort of two different ways.
Yeah, or when something sounds similar, or it's the same word but it means something different. Like you might say, "Why don't you have to be afraid of trees?" And the answer is because their bark is worse than their bite. Because then you're comparing the bark of a tree to the bark of a dog that aren't the same thing at all. Yeah. That's a pun. So if you say something, if you say a pun and you didn't mean for it to be a pun, you weren't trying to make a joke out of it, that's when you say no pun intended. However, sometimes people will say no pun intended, even though they did mean for it to be a pun, and they're just drawing attention to their pun. So it kind of means both things. It can either mean, oh, sorry for the pun, or it could mean, ha ha ha, wasn't that a funny pun? So.
Yeah. So, yes, great. Hope that's helpful. Did we cover that? So yeah, no pun intended.
No pun intended.
Is when you're making a pun, but you point it out beforehand, but you don't mean to. Yeah. Right, we've got a question here from Mohammed Adel. He says, please can you explain by the time is followed with past simple or past perfect. So by the time I left, or by the time I had left. So what is the difference? Is there a difference? By the time I left, by the time I had left. Again, so this is where I'm just making up an example based on what you said. If you've got a better example, Mohammed, let us know. Put that in the comment as well. Yeah. So is there a difference there? By the time I left, he had gone. By the time I had left, he had gone. So in that example, really, it's the same. Those two things have the same meaning, right?
What's going on here is that those are both, like, by the time makes this a time tag, right? Yeah. Specifying what time it is. So when you would use those two depends on whether the time tag is the time you're talking about, or if the time tag is further in the past of the time you're talking about. So once you add by the time, they mean the same thing, but when you would use them would be maybe slightly different. So if you're talking about the next morning, you're talking about a party that happened, a week ago, but you're talking about the next morning and you weren't feeling well. And you said, oh, I'd only had a couple of drinks by the time I had left the party the night before. So see how you're talking about something that's even further in the past? That's when you use the past perfect. But they don't mean something different once you add that by the time.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's almost like there is a difference between the past simple tense and the past perfect tense.
Yes.
But when you use them as a time tag,
a time marker,
a time marker, it sort of annuls that difference in a way. Is that right?
Yeah, because you're not really. But there is still that, we use the past simple when we're talking about a past time, and we use the past perfect when we're talking about a past time, and then we want to talk about an action that's even further in the past. So you still follow that basic pattern. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're getting some examples of puns in the comment.
Shall we have a look at those? Let's see. Which one?
Let's see. Maybe I only saw one. Oh, okay. Maybe there was just one from Robert Munro, Jamie Munro. Not sure.
That's my brother. Hello, Jamie. So I have a split personality, said Tom, being frank. Okay.
So this is a pun because being frank means that you're being honest and you're just sharing what you feel, or you're just telling the truth. But also Frank is a name. So the idea of Tom can be also Frank. You'd have to have a split personality. So it's a pun. That's a good pun. Thank you. Is it Robert or Jamie?
Jamie. We call him Jamie, yeah, because my dad's Robert as well. So anyway, yeah. Right. So let's see. What was the next one? There was another.
So let's go back up. So Santa had another question before the pun one. Okay. And that's, what is escalatory response?
Oh, yes.
So
what is it? Escalatory response.
So more likely you'd hear just the word escalation. An escalation is where you are responding more than what something happened to you. So you hear this a lot of times in politics. One side will do something that the other side doesn't like, and so they'll do something that's even more. So for instance, one side will maybe cut taxes and a little bit, and then the next side will come in and they'll raise taxes to even higher than they were before, or the other way around, right? So you hear this a lot of time in war as well, or as things are leading to war. One side will do aggressive things and the other side will do even more aggressive things and then more aggressive things, and they keep getting worse and worse, and that's how we get wars. This is how, for instance, World War I happened. Some other things.
So I think the key here is the word escalatory. It comes from escalation.
Yes.
It means to go up. For something to escalate. To escalate is the verb. Escalatory is, I guess, a noun form from that verb. So it's an adjective here describing the response. Yeah.
Usually you just hear there was an escalation, But to say an escalatory response is the same thing, because an escalation is a response that is raising the bar, right? So an escalatory would mean something that is raising the bar. Yeah.
Right.
And you hear this kind of thing occasionally in the news. So that's a good question to ask.
So then straight after that, Masa Kayal says, hello teachers, question please. What is the right way to learn English by watching films and TV series? So yeah, we've talked about watching TV shows and films and series as a good way to learn English. But what is the right way to learn English from watching films? Well, I guess it depends. I mean, it's obviously always just good to expose yourself to the language, which is good. But then, you know, what are you doing with that experience? I suppose, you know, do you try to write down words that you don't understand, or if you're able to rewind things? If you're watching with subtitles, it might be easier to be able to write down words you don't understand, so you can go and maybe look them up afterwards. So, you know, things like that. But even just watching it with the subtitles on is going to be helpful, or even without the subtitles on and trying to understand. I think also when you get the visuals, you get sort of the context, and it's sort of helpful to you know, if you get some understanding from that as well, which can help you piece things together. Because when you're learning a language, that's how it is. You understand that bit and that bit and that bit, and you have to kind of fill in the gaps. And then hopefully, as you get better, as you learn more and you understand more, you have less gaps to fill in.
Yes. I'd like to add another major benefit of learning or of films and TV that can help you learn English is that you can rewind. So
yeah,
one of the things that we've talked about is that there's no one thing that you can do to learn. It's a process. You have to spend some time studying, spend some time practicing, that kind of thing. Watching films or TV can be both the study part, where you are learning new words, right? Or it can be the practice part, where you're putting into practice the things that you learned. Like, okay, I'm listening for the new words that I've learned this week, for instance. And where rewinding can really help is if you hear something that you know you're having trouble with, you can rewind and listen to it again and again until you feel like you understood it, or until you understood how they used it. That's something that has been helpful for me, for sure.
Yeah. Great. Okay, we've got another one from Susanta here. I heard a phrase, putting up the nurses. What does put up? What does put up here mean? Well, without seeing the article or the piece you're talking about, I can't be 100% sure. But to put up, one of the meanings of to put up can mean to sort of accommodate. So maybe if the nurses, if this could be something to do with the current situation in the world, where, you know, we need lots of nurses to be working hard to look after people who are sick. So maybe they don't have time to go home. They need to stay somewhere, so they need to be accommodated. And one of the ways of saying that is to put them up, to put up the nurses, to give them somewhere to stay.
Yes.
So yeah, to put up can mean to
give someone a place to stay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree. That's probably what it's referring to here. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Put up also means to increase the price of. So is that used for like increasing the amount of money you pay to people?
Put up the nurses? You wouldn't say put up the nurses if you meant give them a raise.
You'd say put up the nurse's salary.
Yeah, put up the nurse's salary, or put up the salary of
right. Yeah. Okay.
But to put up the nurses,
right,
it's more likely to be give them accommodation.
For sure. If it's just that phrase, that's the only other thing that I could think of is sometimes you do hear that for, like it could be in if the context was slightly different.
Yeah. I mean, there is another meaning of put up. If you put someone up to something, how can I describe that? That's like to make someone do something.
Yeah, to put them in you're kind of manipulating them
situation.
Yeah.
But then you wouldn't say.
No, I don't think so.
You wouldn't say
I don't think
putting them up, putting up the nurses. No.
I can't see that I can't imagine that.
Then you say to. You put them up to.
Put up something to. Put them up to something. Yeah. Yeah. So I would say most likely this is referring to giving nurses a place to live. Maybe if it was putting up the salary of the nurses or putting up the nurses' salary, then it could talk about increasing how much they're being paid. Both of those are issues that I think have come up in the news that I've seen. So, but I'm probably giving them a place to stay.
Okay, so Cele Saavedra, hello there. This person says, what does it mean, the lingo of? The lingo. Well, lingo, I guess, is a kind of expression, an idiomatic expression for language, right?
Yeah, it's short for language. It's an informal word for language, and it means an informal language or a subset of language. So lingo is kind of the language that people use, but not like English or French or Spanish, but what words they use, how they use them, usually in a certain profession or in a certain hobby or something like that. So like people who are fans of baseball know the baseball lingo. They know how to talk about shortstops and RBIs and pop flies and infield fly rules and this kind of stuff. Those are all the words and phrases that a baseball fan would know. A mechanic.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
And a mechanic would have a completely different set of lingo about, auto parts and sensors and fuel flow and all this other stuff, right?
Yeah. So being from the UK, I don't know the lingo of baseball.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you know the lingo of cricket,
though? Probably more so than baseball, but I'm not really into cricket either. Okay, next question. Mudasir says, what's the difference between a photo and picture? So you can draw a picture. So these two words, there's some overlap. You could describe some things as a picture or a photo, but a photo is more specific, something that's being taken with a camera, I suppose.
Whereas picture could be a painting, it could be a drawing, it could be a collage, a mosaic, anything. Picture is the broader term for any kind of image of something.
Yeah.
Photo is specifically a picture you took with a camera, whereas like a painting is specifically a picture that you made with paint. A drawing is specifically a picture that you made with a pencil or charcoal or something like that.
Yeah, and picture is much broader because it can also mean a picture in your head that you just imagine something.
That's true.
Everyone has a picture of the world, which is how they see the world. So yeah, it's used metaphorically as well.
Definitely.
So yeah, hope that's helpful. Let us know.
We've got lots of good questions. I think we may have missed one, not quite a question, but asked Jakir Khan asked to pronounce social. Did we do that one?
Social. Oh, we did skip that. Yeah. So you just want us to pronounce social?
Yeah.
So social.
Yes.
It's maybe that sh sound in the middle there that's tricky. Social.
Yes.
Okay. So where do we get to then? What's next? I think there's an interesting comment here. So interesting comment. It's not a question, but Sabrik says, "Hello, thank you for your pronunciation videos. I've just done it wrong in a phonetics test, but I'll keep practicing." Well, I'm sorry to hear that. But I do hope that our videos will be more helpful. So yeah, keep watching. You're very welcome here on the live stream. So yeah, keep watching.
And this may go with, they have a question just a little bit ahead. So maybe we can go do that question and come back.
Oh right, yeah, I see. Yeah, here we are.
Yeah.
How do you know how to pronounce a name? For example, Bruce. I don't know its pronunciation without looking
up the translation, the transcription before. And that's an excellent question.
Yeah, and if you've watched this live stream, you'll know that we don't know how to pronounce people's names. You know, we get a lot of names that we're not accustomed to on this stream. So, yeah, names are tricky.
Yes. Now, if you're specifically, I mean, I assume you're talking about English names that might show up on a pronunciation test. And then there's a couple of things here, because what the pronunciation test might be doing is intentionally giving you names that are not pronounced phonetically, right? So, for instance, Bruce, it very closely follows the pronunciation kind of rules of phonics for English, but not quite. It would we use a longer U sound, but it's not Bruce. The way it would be if it was something a little bit different, like puce or something like that. But that's just because the R or Y sound doesn't go very well together. Bruce doesn't make sense. So you just drop out the Y and it's Bruce. So the U becomes oo, which is as close as you can get to the long U sound in that word. And so we've talked about this before. Oftentimes, if there's like two different pronunciations, you're not sure what it is, it's just the one that's easier to say. Because if you have to like make some kind of a weird combination of sounds that's not comfortable, chances are that's not really how it's pronounced. And that's exactly what's going on here. So that might help you. Try to sound it out according to the best rules of phonics and pronunciation that you know. And if it's just really hard, probably soften it a little bit to make it easier to say. And that's probably going to get you closest. But in real life, the way you pronounce people's names is you ask them, how do you pronounce your name? If it's not for a test, you just ask them. And that's why it's so hard on YouTube, because we can't ask you, how do you pronounce your name? Because the best you could do is try to spell it out. I mean, if everybody knew the IPA, then that would be fine. But if you're actually talking to someone, you just ask them. And we do this all the time in English. In any language, I'm sure you might. Well, probably not some languages like Spanish.
And I don't know if I got your name right. I said Sabrix, but it could be Sabrix. Sabrix. I don't know. So yeah, it's very difficult. It's difficult. But they shouldn't be testing you on that. I think
if there's a test for it, what they're trying to test is how much experience you have speaking to people in English, because there are a lot of words in English that aren't really dictionary words, that up until recently you couldn't look up the pronunciation of a name like Bruce. It just wouldn't be, it's not going to be in a dictionary or something. And so, but that native speakers just kind of have heard this name before, and so they know how to pronounce it. So they might just be checking to see how much experience you have. But unless it's like they're trying to tell whether you have like a complete fluent level of pronunciation, they're not going to worry about the fact that you don't know how to pronounce a name like that, I would imagine.
Yeah. Now, we got another question here from Suzanne, so another comment. But before we answer this, I just want to point something out here. Suzanne, so you said, can you explain me why we say that? Now, explain, this is a very common mistake with the verb explain. You don't explain me, I don't explain you. It's not about the person you're talking to. You explain something to me. So you should say, can you explain why we say, bring me an apple? I don't explain you, or you don't explain me. That's not how the verb explain works. But this is a very common mistake. I hear this from lots of people with lots of different first languages. So,
yes. In fact, it's actually the question that she's asking here, which is, when do you need to use the word to in front of me? And the answer is with certain words.
Right.
So, for instance, you can't say explain me why, but you say explain to me why. But you can say, please tell me why we say this, right? Yeah. So certain words, the technical for this is they take an indirect object by default. So certain verbs you can use me immediately after. Tell me, bring me, help me, right? But you can't always use an indirect object without to for any verb, only for certain verbs. And that answers your question. That's why you can say, bring me an apple, but not bring to me an apple. But if you use it after, bring an apple to me is correct, but not bring an apple me, right? So the word bring, if you use me right after it, you don't use to. Same for tell. You don't say tell to me, but it has to be right after it for certain verbs.
Mm.
Does that answer the question? I feel like I may have gotten a little confusing.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah. I was just distracted by the explain me, because that's something I hear a lot and it bugs me.
Exactly. and that really is, co-location is so important in English.
Yeah.
What words go together, right? So the rule about an indirect object, you're not saying what action is being acted on, but like where it's going to. So like I throw the ball to Colin. The to Colin is the indirect object. I'm not throwing Colin. I'm throwing something to Colin. And certain verbs don't need the to if that indirect object comes right after, right? Like, for instance, tell. We usually put the indirect object first because that's what's most important. When you tell something, you're telling it to someone. So I will tell Colin a secret, right? The secret is what's being told. It's the object. But it's not as important as who I'm telling, the indirect object. So for certain verbs like this, bring, tell, help, we put the indirect object first without to. So help me carry this, right? Tell me what you need. But you can't use that with everything. It's explain to me this problem, or explain this problem to me.
What I think is more common is, explain something.
Yes.
The thing you want explaining is the direct object of explain, not the person you're talking to. Is that right?
Yes. Yes, exactly. The thing is the direct object. The thing you're having explained. And in English, the order of the direct and indirect object doesn't always matter. You can say, explain to me why we say this, or explain why we say this to me. Either one is fine. But it is going to determine what verb you use, whether you use the to in front of the indirect object.
So she does follow up here. She says, why can't we say, bring to me an apple? Well, you can
That's
say
the same thing. But the reason you don't is because bring takes the indirect object by default, and so we don't usually use to. So you can say, tell to me your secrets, but you wouldn't. I would even say it's wrong to say bring to me an apple or tell to me your secrets.
It's antiquated. It sounds yeah.
I'm not even sure if it's antiquated. I'm not sure if it was right in the past or not. But it's definitely something that we don't do. So I would say it's wrong, but it's not like, I would say it's wrong.
I can imagine like someone saying, bring me an apple, as if it's like quite over, being very
say it poetically maybe, but not in common discourse. If you say it just regularly,
Shakespeare times or something, but it's that's why.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but it's definitely more poetic, more highfalutin.
It sounds like you're talking down on the person.
Yeah,
to
that's the thing. I think that may have been the case even back in certainly Lewis Carroll. Some of the other writers I can think of that did this definitely were intentionally trying to sound highfalutin and not like real speech. Yeah, so that's a really good question. And the whole thing about collocation and direct objects and explain to me. These are all very important things for speaking English in confident, comfortable ways that people will understand. I mean, these are really common mistakes that a lot of people make, so don't worry too much. But definitely something you can do to improve your speaking.
Yeah. Great. So let's see. We've got a comment here from Massa. Thank you.
Can I just jump in and say we've had a request for the Facebook Live link again? Can you post that or just show that again?
Yeah, I've been monitoring it. There we go. There's only a couple of people watching there. So yeah, if you are watching on Facebook, I don't know if we've had any comments. If we have, they're not coming through on the page. But actually, yes, I'm looking at it now. Some comments, but nothing. No questions or anything. So yeah, comment from Elisio. A couple of comments from Elisio. So hello to you. You're very welcome. Yeah, we don't use Facebook very much. Literally haven't posted anything really for years. I've had that for almost a decade. So maybe we'll start doing more. It was just because this new system that we're using allows me to just sort of syndicate it out to multiple channels. So I just added the Facebook one because I could do it easily. So in the future, we might have this go out on other channels as well, maybe Twitch, or I think you can have it go in LinkedIn and things like that as well. So we'll look into that. But yeah, and maybe we will start doing some more things on Facebook. So yeah, do join the page if you're interested in following us there. So yeah, let's see, what's the next question? Mohammed's given an example. Yeah, well, yeah, I was just showing this comment because it's great. Masakael says, thank you for your phonetics video. They're great, and they helped me pass my exam, which is great.
Yes.
So
that's great.
I am, yeah, really pleased to have been of assistance. So yeah, Mohammed, I think this is a follow-up from the question before, which is great. By the time I left, I had seen Jack. So this was about the time markers and things. So I think we covered that though. So
yes, I would say that I think that the one in your particular example, your first example is definitely the better one. By the time I left, I had seen Jack, because this is specifically how the past perfect is usually used. It's with a time marker in the past simple. So you're saying this is when it happened, and at that point, this is what had already happened. Right? That's the perfect example of when to use the past perfect. Right? You've got a past simple verb, and then you say by that time. Whether you say by that time or not explicitly, that's what the past perfect means. Is by the time that this sentence is talking about, this had already happened. The effect was already there.
Yeah. So you're normally going to use a past perfect with a past simple.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah.
And the fact that you're saying, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So when you're using two verbs in the same sentence like that, it's not wrong, but it's less common. It doesn't sound as natural to have them in the same tense, like you did in the second example. By the time I had left, I had seen Jack. It's better to say by the time I left, I had seen Jack.
Can we go back to the one before though, just real quick?
Yeah.
So here we were, the original question was by the time, so that you're specifically talking about a time marker. But this pattern of the past simple is the time marker and the past perfect tells what had already happened, works even without an explicit time marker. So if you said, I left because I had seen Jack, right? Then I left isn't technically a time marker. You're not saying when I left, I had seen Jack, or by the time I had left, or by the time I left, I had seen Jack. You're just using it in the sentence. I left because I had seen Jack. Still, the past simple is acting as the time marker. And so that's very, very common. If you have a sentence with multiple tenses, one of them will be kind of a time marker, and the other will be talking about what either was happening at the same time, or what had already happened, or what hadn't happened yet. So you could say, by the time I left, I was regretting going to that party. So at that, you're using a past continuous to show that around that time something was happening, and so on. So this is the pattern for how to use the past tenses.
Yeah. Now there's a question that kind of ties in with that. I'm skipping over AJ's question, but we're going to come back to that. But because this kind of ties in, Vladislav says, how do you easily define when I should use the past simple or the present perfect? So the past simple and the present perfect are it's kind of confusing because they're very similar. They do both sort of talk about
something in the past.
Something in the past, exactly. But the key here is that the present perfect is a present tense. So why is it a present tense? Now, so this is one of the keys to Inside English, our course that we're writing. And one of the keys is about the different types of action. So each or different times of action. Yeah. So you have past, present, and future, and then those are the times of action, and the types of action are the perfect, simple, and continuous. Now, the time of action is the time you're talking about. It's not necessarily when the action happened. And that's where the confusion comes in with the present perfect. You're talking about the present, but the action happened in the past. So it gets confused as a past tense. But what it is you're talking about the effect of that thing in the past on the present. So a good example is I've lost my keys. So losing your keys happened at some point in the past. We don't really know exactly when. But the point is,
you're not talking about that.
No, what you're talking about is that now you don't have them. Whereas you could say, yesterday I lost my keys. That would be past simple. Yesterday I lost my keys. Then you are talking about yesterday. And we don't know what the situation is now. Maybe you found them. Maybe you didn't. You still don't have them. We don't know. Because in that sentence, we're talking about the past. We're just saying that you lost them yesterday. Yeah. So go on.
Yeah. Oh, and that's really the key. Like, are you talking about now? Then use a present tense, right? If you're telling a story about what happened to you, then you're using the past simple because you're talking about the past, right? But if you're talking about right now and the result, like the result of past actions, that's when you use the present perfect. Someone says, do you like the UK? And you say, I haven't been to the UK, because you're talking about now. You wouldn't say, well, you could say, I never visited the UK, but you're really talking about right now, and that's why you use the present perfect. I have never visited the UK, right? All sorts of things. What do you do? I have recently gotten a job, right? So you're talking about something that happened in the past, but you're talking about now, that you have a job now. And so you use the present perfect.
Yeah. So I hope that's helpful. Now, that is what our course is all about, which is what AJ's question was about. So yeah, when will the course be ready? Great question. So those of you who've been following our live streams for a while will know we've been giving you some regular updates. I can now tell you that all of the lessons from the first 4 modules are now filmed. We just need to put them together onto the website, add the questions. We might need to film a kind of introduction video, but we are hoping that something will go live and be available within a week or so.
Very soon.
So yes, maybe next week's live stream might be a lot more about that. You'll have to watch this space. Yes. But yeah, that's what the course is all about. It's about making tense make sense, because a lot of people say that tenses are really difficult and confusing, and there's so many things that make it complicated, like the irregular verbs, and every tense has got something weird about it. And what I've found with teaching English is that the courses, the textbooks, they tend to sort of take a tense, they decide, we're going to teach this tense, present simple or whatever, and then we're going to also teach everything that's weird about it. The third person S, the S on the third person form, and the fact that you don't need the auxiliary verb with the present tenses and things like that. They teach all the weird things at the same time as teaching the tense. Whereas what we're doing, our approach in this course is to sort of put all those unusual things to one side and just focus on the logic, on focus on what does make sense. because there is a structure, there is a logic that really, really is lost, I think, when you focus too much on the irregularities.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, to completely understand things, you need to know the irregularities, but it's also really good to just focus on the logic, focus on how it makes sense. How does tense actually work?
Because we really think that understanding how things work together is what really gives you the confidence to speak and know that you're on the right track, and also it helps you avoid really common errors that lots of people make because they don't understand how things work together. They've learned all of the tenses, for example, separately, and they've learned long lists of when to use them, but they've never really understood what that tense means. And therefore, when they encounter a new situation, they don't necessarily know which tense to use. Whereas if you learn the core logic, then you'll always know what tense means what you want to say. And there still might be exceptions, but you'll understand what that tense means. And that will give you a lot more confidence to go ahead and say the way you think it should be said. And you're probably going to be right.
Now, we've got a great question here from Alex. I'm confused about using present progressive and present continuous progressive. Can you explain to me the use of it? Well, now, the grammar has different words for the same things. You might read one textbook that will call something an infinitive, another one that will call it a base form, or another one will call it a to infinitive, things like that. And I think that's what's happening here, because aren't the progressive tense and the continuous tense the same thing?
They are the same thing, yes.
Yeah. So really, there's no such thing as the continuous progressive. That's just the continuous. So
yes.
Yeah. So the difference between the progressive and the continuous? They're the same thing.
They are the same thing. Yeah.
Continuous progressive doesn't exist.
So this is a problem that we get a lot. People will ask us a question using a specific term, and that is one issue. Is that
yeah?
Say again.
Yeah, sometimes we get asked a question using a term that is not the term that we're familiar with, and it gets confusing. Yeah.
Yes, and this is an issue, and that's part of why we're doing Inside English. Is when people are taught English, they learn a lot of different terms. Some of those terms are widely used. Some of the terms are really old and no one uses them anymore, but they're still in textbooks. But the terms sometimes take away from really understanding what it means.
Yeah.
Right. So we tend to avoid using complicated terms except where they are universally used, like things like a direct and an indirect object, right? But so we talk about what it means. We talk about the time of action, like when you are talking about, instead of using some technical term like that you could use, but we want to avoid that. We focus on understanding what it means as opposed to the many different technical terms for something.
Because at the end of the day, well, I guess we're making the assumption that people want to learn to speak and understand, to express themselves and to understand other people in the English language. They're not trying to. Well, we're assuming that you're not just trying to learn lots of grammatical terms and what they mean. And now, some people are grammarians, and they are really interested in understanding all the really complex grammar. I'm not one of those people. I use grammar as a tool for teaching and for learning, but I'm not interested in learning absolutely everything there is to know about grammar. And the same thing goes with phonetics. It's a huge subject, and it's a small amount of it is a useful tool, but not all of it. And you don't need to know it to be able to express yourself. You just can use some of it to help. So yeah, that's that. So yeah, so going back to AJ's question, very soon. Next week we should have something to say about that. So great. Did we skip over one? No, I don't think so. Let's see.
Now, I did notice we had some comments on Facebook, but I'm not, for some reason, I'm not able to consistently see the comments. But I saw that there was one about using the present perfect to refer to actions that are happening like right now or that happen every day. Can you see those comments?
It looks like we've got one person active on Facebook, which is great. So Florence, hello, you are very welcome here. And you did say, are you live every day? Well, no, we've been going live mostly on YouTube every week for about 6 months. And this is the first time we've actually put it on Facebook as well. So yes, we are live now, just on Facebook really as an experiment. If you're not subscribed to us on YouTube, that's the best place to go. So yeah, go and subscribe on YouTube. But yeah, so the question here, let's see. Also, we use for continuous tense ing with auxiliary verb and perfect ing with perfect. Along with this, we add time since or from years, day out. Yeah, I think she's talking about what we were talking about before with the having the two different tenses in the same sentence. Not sort of a question in its own right.
Okay.
Yeah. So Florence is in India. Hello, great to see you.
Good to see you.
So yeah, I'm still not accustomed to the Facebook comments. They don't appear in the same feed as the YouTube one. I have to go over to YouTube to Facebook, and it doesn't show me all of them. It only shows me the last few. Although we've got 15 or so comments there.
Yeah, I saw that there were a bunch.
But
so
yeah,
that's exciting. So Santa, I think, said hello on the Facebook chat. So
she's watching two different places at the same time.
It's very exciting. Yeah,
one of our biggest fans. Yes, well, great. So here we are. We talked about lingo earlier. Miriam is asking, does lingo mean the same as jargon? Well,
lingo means the language that is spoken by a particular group of people. It could be based on jargon is the language that's used by a certain subject. So when I gave those examples, like a baseball fan and a mechanic, those are both jargon. But lingo doesn't have to be by subject. It can also be by place, right? So for instance, people in certain, like in the Deep South, for instance, would have a different set of idioms and the ways that they would talk that someone from a different part of the U.S. might not understand. A person from the Scottish Highlands or the Welsh Highlands might not be able to be understood by a person from the big cities because they would combine different things. They would speak in different ways. So a lingo is any kind of specific language group or language of a specific group of people. Jargon means it's specifically related to a topic, like a sport or a science or a profession. So lingo is a bigger group, like picture is a bigger word than photo. A jargon is one kind of lingo.
Yeah, great. So let's see. Here's a question from Cele Saavedra. How do you pronounce Liverpool and Birmingham? So Liverpool and Birmingham. How would you pronounce those, Tony? I'm from the UK, so I have a British accent. Tony is in Canada, but he's from Florida. So
I would pronounce them the way that you did because I know how they're correctly pronounced. However, there are actually more than one Birmingham in the U.S. and they are pronounced Birmingham. However, these are relatively easy ones. If you get places like Leicestershire or some of these other ones where Americans would pronounce them completely wrong. Yeah.
Well, actually, I remember I was in the US and I was visiting a place called Durham, and there's a place called Durham in the UK.
Yes,
So the one in America is named after the one here.
and that's correct.
The guy at the bus stop, the bus station place, couldn't pronounce it properly. He was like Durham.
Really?
Yeah. And I do think a lot of people actually do. But so this is one of the differences between American and British English. American is a little bit more phonetic. The problem with English in general is that it's not very phonetic, but American English is a little bit more phonetic. So you will get Americans saying Durham instead of Durham because it has an H in, and you will get Americans saying Birmingham.
And you do hear people say Birmingham as opposed to Birmingham, Alabama.
Yeah, and that's why they have problems with things like Warwick, which has got a W. Warwick.
Yes, there is a Warwick Street in the city that I live in, and people do pronounce it Warwick. Of course, there's also in Canada there is a Thames River, just like in the United Kingdom, and there is an active debate in Canadians amongst those who pronounce it the Thames and those who pronounce it the Thames, because that is phonetic. However, that's not an issue of it being one being American, one being a British pronunciation or Canadian. It's just that some people don't know how to pronounce it. And that is a well-known word that is pronounced Thames, not Thames.
Yeah, so it's definitely pronounced that way. But the real question is, why is it spelled that way? Because TH should be. This is what we're saying about. This is the problem with English.
Exactly.
It's not.
And the answer is always history, right? Yeah. TH didn't used to be pronounced, and that's why. Yeah.
It's like Thailand. We don't say that. We just say T. We don't say Thailand. Aaliyah says, hello, lovely teachers. Hello, lovely
welcome back.
And followers and subscribers. Let's see. Oh, here we are. So Facebook comments are appearing now in the
that's great.
stream. We've got a comment here. Eliseo says, what's up? What's up, Eliseo? Well. Thank you for watching. This is the first time we've gone live on Facebook, so that's great. Yeah, I think actually we're just behind in the comments. They are appearing. It's just they've only now come up. So let's get ahead. Let's see. We've got some good questions here. Sebastian says, "Do you have any advice on how to maintain a balance in the formality level of speech? Since learning vocabulary is, in a sense, pouring meaning into words that you're new to." Yeah, so sometimes you might get words that in reality they're used in a formal way, only used in a formal way. But the meaning is the same as other words that you use more informally. So how do you know which one to use?
And I think we already had the answer on this stream, and the answer is movies and television. Will give you a much better idea of what language. Now, of course, if you're watching Shakespearean dramas or Downton Abbey or whatever, then you're not going to get the same. But if you're watching contemporarily set movies, you'll get maybe a more realistic lingo than you would if you're watching the news or if you're watching documentaries. Yeah, you don't really, as far as maintaining a balance, I wouldn't worry about it too much, especially in vocabulary. I wouldn't worry so much about it in vocabulary. It's about collocation. It's about what words you put together the way you do. That's going to determine whether you sound stuffy and off or whether you sound natural.
Now, I've talked in the past about a kind of 3-step process that I've observed in my own language learning when I was learning Spanish, where at first you don't understand much, and then you start picking. You learn things, you learn the meaning of a word, and then you start to hear it, and then hopefully you can fill in the gaps. So yeah, when you learn a word, then you start to hear it, so then you need to sort of think, when am I hearing it? Who's using it? How are they using it? Are they using it formally, informally? And it's because I found, that was so that the first step is that you learn the meaning of a word or a tense or something. Then you start to hear it, and then the third step is then you can actually have the confidence to start using it because you've heard other people use it in a certain context. So so hopefully that's helpful to sort of listen and observe, and like you said, Tony, about TV shows and things are a good way to do that, but also just in conversations, listening to other people.
It is absolutely vital that if you want to improve your English as much as you can, to be speaking to native speakers, whether that's going out. Whether that's going out and finding visitors to your country, or finding ways to get on Zoom conversations, or going online and finding a learning partner, or tourism, traveling to places not so easy right now. That's really the way you're going to improve the best, is by practicing what you're using, asking people to correct you when you make a mistake, and because it's a process, you can't just learn by studying, you can't just learn by watching, you can't just learn by listening. You have to. Conversation is really the best thing because you're doing all those things at once.
Yeah. So just quickly, got a comment from Aliyah saying that I think we really helped them and answered the question that they had earlier on. So that's great. Now there's a question here from Cele Saavedra. I hope I'm saying your name right. Could you make a video explaining the types of release and variations of place of articulation? I find it very difficult to understand it. Yeah. So now, like we've said earlier about grammar rules and things, and grammar being a useful tool to understand English, and the same thing with phonetics. Even though those subjects go very, very deep and into a lot of detail, it's not necessarily, you don't necessarily need to know everything to know how to speak English. This is why I haven't gone too much into this kind of thing. I mean, the reason I started out with phonetics, it was by accident, really. When I was teaching English, we had this phonetic chart up on the wall. Not a lot of people really used it where I was or understood it. So I just experimented and did a video, and it sort of took off on YouTube, and we got this following, which is awesome. So the reason I haven't done this, I mean, I might do this. Could be useful, but this is the thing. I really want to focus on what is actually going to be useful for people, and phonetics does go very, very deep into something that is not learning English,
right?
Because
it's a science of its own.
Phonetics is the science of speech. It's not specific to English. Some of these subjects are the things that I'm not experts on when it gets to place of articulation and types of release and things like that. Well, I could cover it briefly in a video, but off the top of my head,
I think that I just want to break in here and say that, especially Colin's. I mean, I definitely agree with this, but he's the one who's been saying this for years. Main point about pronunciation is that pronunciation is physical, right? Yeah. It's all about where you put your mouth, the parts of your mouth, right? And I think that's all that this question is really asking about: is can you go through some of those different mouth positions and talk about them? What is the difference between touching your teeth with your tongue as opposed to touching your palate? What's the difference between blowing out and forcing air through a narrow space? And right? And I think that this is where a lot of the videos have been talking about already. And I think maybe going through and doing a video where we just kind of talk about those different pieces.
How the sound is actually made, pointing out how the sound is actually made and how people make mistakes, whereas sort of listing all of the different types of release, because that is just a form of jargon we talked about. I don't want to get too deep into phonetics jargon and make videos that most people won't understand, and it won't really be helpful to people that do understand it. But yeah, like that's a good point actually. Going through, talking about the different ways that sounds are made, could be a good video. And I do want to make some more and more videos soon. I've got an idea for a sort of new format that should make things easier to make, because I haven't really made, apart from these live streams, I've not done any content videos for a long time because I've been working.
I mean, we've been making lots of videos, but we're waiting and saving them all into this package. We're almost done.
They're all part of this course. Yeah. So
but we will be releasing those videos on YouTube as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was working on something today with this sort of new format. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel and click the bell icon, because there will be new videos coming very soon, as well as the new course that's coming in hopefully a week or so.
Yes.
Yes. So, okay. Let's see.
I would love to get to if we just take a couple of minutes here to answer Alia's question. Because
the one we just had?
No, that was silly. Alia's question was with at or in.
Oh yeah, here we are.
So at or in with places. How do you differentiate between them and know whether we should use at university or in university? So this is going back to, we talked about how important collocation is in English. Certain words just go together in certain ways. For instance, so at university at university and in university mean different things. At university means you're on the campus. It doesn't matter whether you're inside or outside, you're still at university. In university does not mean you're in the building. It means you are enrolled. You are a student of the university, right? So, and that's why, we couldn't just go over all the different situations you use at and all the different situations you use in, right? Because you'd be in a building, not at a building. I mean, if you were at a building, that means you are standing outside, or you're in the parking lot or something. So these words don't always, especially with prepositions, they don't always mean the same thing with different words. And that's why they can be tricky.
Yeah.
And this is why, again, don't worry about it too much. Don't stress like I don't know how to use prepositions correctly. Prepositions have way too many rules to really just kind of learn them all by memorizing a bunch of rules. The way you're going to get good at using prepositions is by speaking English a lot, listening to a lot of English speakers, practicing, and eventually what will happen is your brain will just kind of pick up which words to use together. Because this is something really interesting about collocation. The way we learn is terrible at this, because you can't memorize lists of words that go together. It's just too hard for your brain. But your brain is really good at learning these on its own. It just picks them up. It connects words, because that's everything about how your brain works, is connecting different concepts. So your brain is really good at taking two words and connecting them and understanding what that means. So you just kind of have to let your brain learn on its own, as opposed to trying to force yourself to memorize a bunch of lists.
So Florence on Facebook's got a question that ties in with this. So how about at the office and in the office?
I would say this is the same thing, right?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to check.
Like you might use some in times you wouldn't. So for instance, if you're driving and someone calls you and they say, where are you? And you just pull into the parking lot, you would say, I'm at the office now, right? Because you're there, but you're not inside. But if you're inside the office, like if you're at your desk and someone calls you and they, where are you? You can say, I'm in the office or I'm at the office. It doesn't matter, right? So they mean in this case, they mean almost exactly the same, but they can also mean something slightly different. Yeah, and so Alia points out, so I just need to train my brain to catch up with some patterns. And yes, just let your brain catch up. Just practice, just listen. I don't recommend trying to memorize all of these. Eventually, your brain will memorize it without you even knowing it. Yeah. And we know this has happened. This works because that's literally what every native speaker has done. They don't memorize lists of when to use prepositions at the right time, right?
Yeah. So jargon, and there does seem to be a common theme in this episode, in this stream.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the question of, again, at includes more area than in. Not always. It can be. They sometimes mean completely different things, like at university or in university, right? So it's not like at usually means like,
that's trying to make rules up when.
And that's what we want to do.
Rules,
we want to make a list of rules. But if you did that, the list of rules would just go on forever. So don't try to worry about which one necessarily means more than the other. That's not how prepositions work. They don't follow the rules of what the preposition means. They follow what words go with them, and each word, each different preposition might mean different things. They create little prepositional phrases.
I think learning English is a bit like learning to ride a bike. Like some people start with like the stabilizers on, or you might call them training wheels, which means you can't fall off. And those are like the rules.
Yes.
They're kind of helpful, at the beginning. But eventually you just got to go by the feel of it. You got to you take them off, forget about them, and go by the feel of it. Trust your instinct.
Yes.
So I think when it's good, when you're at this stage and you keep wanting to find these rules, then you're at the stage you need to let go of the rules.
Yes, that's a great place to be. And Ali, I think that they're intentionally throwing a pun out here with co-location's rule is better than looking for rules. So that's a great pun. I like it.
Okay, that's a good pun. Yes. Yeah. So we've gone on longer than we normally do. Time flying by.
We have a ton of people here. We got 20 likes already.
Awesome.
That's
great. I haven't even been looking at that. And we've got people from Facebook, especially Florence on Facebook.
Yes. So, and we've had loads of questions. We love it when we have loads of questions. It's great.
Yeah, I do just quickly want to touch on this because, like we were saying about jargon and phonetics jargon that we don't want to get too into. So here, Suba on Facebook says, in British English, is W an alveolar sound or a palato-alveolar sound? So this is exactly what I mean about the jargon, which off the top of my head, I'm not sure about. So yes, I just wanted to. I can't help you now off the top of my head, but this is the kind of thing. I think I've done a video on all of the phonetic sounds. So if you go to that video, I probably say what it is. But I can't remember because this is just jargon that you don't really need to know.
Right. What we're more likely to do is say, this is how you say this sound. Put your tongue here, as opposed to give you a bunch of very specific. Sometimes we know the terminology. We generally tend to, but not always. And the thing is, it's not always the same depending on where you're learning, right? Mm-hmm. So we just try to avoid jargon and instead talk about what it means, what you do, using actual English instead of highly technical jargon.
Yeah. Now I did have a student recently. I was working with on Skype, and he had some problems with the w sound, and what we did realize was the key to it is that it's made in the lips. So I think that means it's the palato, but that's irrelevant. What phrase, what technical term to use. The key is that it's in the lips.
Yes.
It's not. I can't remember how.
So when you are lifting your tongue towards the roof of your mouth, the palate, right? But that's not the key to making the sound. The sound is in the lips, and it's also in the airflow, right? So those different components. We can go through all the different components, right? Is it voice? No, you're not using your vocal cords.
Well, no, you are.
Oh yeah. I guess it depends. There's a voiced and an unvoiced W, isn't there?
I guess yeah.
So like you ask, are you using your vocal cords? Do you blow through? Do you constrict your airflow like a f or a s, right? Or do you open up the airflow like as in an ah or something like that? So, what do you do with your lips? What do you do with your tongue? And you can go through all of these different physical things and you get the sound. In the case of the W, though, the by far the most important thing is in the lips. You do raise your tongue, usually kind of the middle back of your tongue, but that's not what makes the sound. It's
that's more just to sort of get it out of the way. It's not you're not making the sound with the tongue.
Well, again, I think there's a range of sounds that all belong to that same phoneme, and the ones that are more common in English, it tends to be with that raised back of the tongue, but that's very small. That's not what's going to determine whether someone understands you or not, right? It's what you did with your lips in this case. Yes, you can make it without raising your tongue, and people will understand you. But if you try to make it without the right lip action, people won't understand you.
Yeah.
So it's all in the lips. Yeah.
By the question really, because the palato. So alveolar normally refers to this part around the top of the mouth, and palato is this part at the back at the top of the mouth. So w is not really. Neither of those are really important with the w sound. It's the lips are the most important thing. Anyway, I just wanted to touch on that because it's
no, it's a good example. Yeah,
it's a good example of the jargon that we want to get beyond the jargon and talk in a way that we can all understand.
Right. We want to tell you how to say it, but if you're looking for the science of pronunciation, then that's not what we're passionate about or what we want to share. We want to help people speak English. I mean, I love linguistics. Linguistics are fascinating. I love the history of sounds, the history of different alphabets and that kind of stuff. But that's not what we're here to do. You know? Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Okay. So I think it's probably a good time to leave it. Yeah. So yeah, if we didn't get your comment, I'm really sorry, but check the website for the next live stream, englishlanguageclub.co.uk/live. When we know when our next live stream will be, you'll see it there.
Yes.
I'm thinking it probably will be next week. We have been going every week, every Tuesday, 2 o'clock UK time. But
as things get towards the end of the year, there's other things that are going to be coming up. So we may not be going every week for the rest of the year, probably next week. But then you'll just have to keep checking out that site, the /live on the englishlanguageclub.co.uk. Then you'll always be up to date on knowing when the next live stream is. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you guys all. You're a wonderful group. We really appreciate your questions. Yeah. Really good questions today. It's fantastic.
Yeah. So yeah, don't forget to like the video and to subscribe to the channel. And click the bell icon, obviously, and then you will get notified when we go live, as well as checking out the website. If you bookmark that page, keep checking back regularly, then you'll know in advance when we're going to be live. Yeah, so great talking to you today, and we will see you soon. Bye-bye.